My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowski Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. For more than 3 million Puerto Ricans living on the island, this is their season, or decade, or century of discontent. Through a combination of natural disasters, economic stagnation, and dysfunctional governing structures, Puerto Ricans are struggling under austerity measures imposed by a federally imposed oversight board, even as a privatized mainland-based electricity provider has failed to rebuild its basic infrastructure in the wake of Hurricanes Irma, Maria, and most recently, Fiona. That has left islanders literally in the dark for extended periods of time. It goes beyond the grotesque image of then-President Donald Trump tossing paper towels to Puerto Ricans seeking post-hurricane assistance. Shifting tax policy imposed by Washington has undercut attempts to build a broad-based economy, and the presence of the Jones Act, a union-spawned law which mandates only American-flagged ships can deliver emergency supplies from American ports, underscored how dependent Puerto Ricans are on their Washington overlords. Because of the unsettled existential debate over Puerto Rico's status, whether its future is independence as the 51st state or continuing some form of its current Commonwealth status, hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans have been able to take advantage of their American citizenship to freely migrate to the mainland, a safety valve option that would change under independence. In fact, estimates of the number of Puerto Ricans of those of Puerto Rican descent living in the mainland U.S. is near 6 million, almost double the number on the island, and that outmigration has skyrocketed in the last decade in the wake of the hurricanes and an earthquake. Even as mainland hedge fund and cryptocurrency millionaires and billionaires swoop in to buy our properties, creating a wave of gentrification and internal displacement that exacerbates all the other problems. All this on an island graced with astonishing beauty, and a hardworking populations that benefited the broader United States economically, culturally, militarily, and spiritually in the 124 years since the U.S. seized it as among the spoils of the Spanish-American War in 1898. What are Puerto Ricans and the U.S. to do? We're joined by 4 New Yorkers of Puerto Rican descent who take part in the debate over the future of La Isla Boricua and what it means here and there. Ruben Diaz Jr. is the former Bronx Borough president and current executive at Montefiore Health System, whose borough has traditionally been home to the largest Puerto Rican diaspora population. Sandra Guzman, who is joining us via Zoom, is a veteran journalist and award-winning documentary filmmaker who has chronicled the lives of Latino and Latina, and I guess Latinx diaspora across a broad array of platforms. Hector Cordero Guzman, a professor at Baruch College and the CUNY Graduate Center, has studied and written extensively on the plight of Puerto Rico and is president of CUNY's Research Foundation. Carlos Vargas Ramos is the director of public policy, external relations, and development for the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at CUNY's Hunter College. Carlos, let me start with you. Your director just had a piece in the New York Times, Yarime Bonilla, kind of laying out how tired Puerto Ricans are of the repetitive nature of, in this case, climate-related, assaults, but it could extend to the political assaults as well. Set the stage.
Yeah, the question is whether Puerto Rican need to be celebrated for how resilient they are. Why should that be celebrated? It is actually a feature that we have had to develop over the course of decades at this point, facing economic hardship, natural disaster, man-made compounded disasters as a result of this natural disaster, when in fact what we need is actual responsiveness from governmental institutions at the local, state, or Commonwealth and federal levels. And that is not happening effectively, efficiently, in a way that the residents of Puerto Rico, U.S. citizens, deserve and demand.
Hector, this history goes beyond the last 5 years or 10 years. How did we get here? This strange status that Puerto Rico has.
As you remarked in your introductory comments, Puerto Rico was acquired by the U.S., invaded by the U.S. as a result of the Spanish-American War. It was a very convenient tool for the U.S. during the Cold War. It provided, starting with the economy, sugar cane and other goods and services that were very needed and consumed in the U.S., large estates, and a population that was with high levels of poverty. There was a plan set forth around Second World War and before, Operation Bootstrap, that led to some economic development, but poverty still remains very high. And the disconnection between who rules and who runs Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican people is also very high. And I completely agree with Carlos that we should celebrate oppressed peoples that get up and fight their oppression, but we should look deeper into the roots of why that's the case. It's not so much the capacity to get up and fight, it's why are Puerto Ricans continuously knocked down. And in part it's because their voice as a collective hasn't really been heard when it's come time to write the story of Puerto Rico. It's been written by the large economic interest, by the large political interest in the US, and the Puerto Rican people have been there for the right and the suffering, but not in control of it, and that's, I think, a large part of the challenge.
Sandra, this, talking about some of the outside economic interests, if you will, that have basically bought up Puerto Rico and treated it, you refer to it as a colony. And that also didn't just start. I mean, we've seen recently people buying up waterfront property and basically pushing out local residents. They've created, as I understand it, an Airbnb corridor in Rincon on the west part of the island. This is also, it may be different, but in many ways it's not new.
Well, first of all, it's nice to see you, Bob,
Good to
and
see you,
Carlos, and Hector, and Ruben. I am just happy that you're exploring this topic, which deserves deep dives.
Well, also
because-
remember, this is CUNY, and
Yes.
there's a huge number of students of Puerto Rican descent. So.
Yes, yes. So it's really clear that what we are experiencing in Boriquen, because Puerto Rico is the colonized name of Boriquen. We know that the original name is Boriquen, which is why we say Boricua. So I love to always start with that in any conversation we're having about Puerto Rico, because we have been under two imperial powers since 1493. Coincidentally, the two times that the empires, the Spanish Empire and the US Empire entered the Big Island, because we're an archipelago, was through my ancestral town, through the southwest part of Puerto Rico, of Boriquen. So to understand where we are today, we have to go back in history. We have to go back, and I think it was Carlos and Hector who rightly pointed out of the ways in which the architecture of Puerto Rico was set up to be an extractive, very rich place for two empires, right? So I was born there. I was raised in Jersey. I'm a Jersey Rican. And I always want to say I'm a New Yorican, which is, for many of us, it's like the 79th city in Puerto Rico. There's 78 municipalities, and New York would be the 79th.
Some people think that Puerto Rico is the sixth borough, but that's a different point.
So in 2016, I bought my first home. I purchased in Luquillo, and I have seen firsthand the incredible pace of gentrification that's happening on the Big Island and the smaller islands, Culebra and Vieques. We're talking about one American woman who's taking advantage of these tax incentives of purchasing 9 homes and turning them into Airbnbs. We're looking at major and smaller hotels and Airbnbs being built in the sacred rainforest. One indigenous elder told me that what we are experiencing right now is a third wave of colonization. So the first one was in 1493, the second one was in 1898, and now in 2022, what we're experiencing on social media and in real, bloody ways, the incredible imperial powers of the United States of America. And I mentioned the word colony in every conversation I have, because it wasn't until recently that I was allowed by editors in papers and digital spaces that I write for to use the word colony, because I've been pushed to say Commonwealth or territory, but when you look at it, it really is a colony set up to extract and extract and extract. And one more thing I want to say, that we have given so much, and we, the Puerto Rican community, both on the island, the islands, and off the island, so much of our blood. I think per square mile, more Puerto Ricans have fought in U.S. world wars than any other group of people. So it's time that we really talk about a federal government that takes responsibility for the abuses that have lasted for 123 years.
Ruben, the Bronx is the home of the largest diaspora of Puerto Ricans, and even though the most recent waves coming out of the island post Hurricane Maria have actually seems like the most have been going to Central Florida, which could change the politics of Florida. But when all hell breaks loose on the island, there's an impact for us here in New York City, in particular the Bronx.
Yes, but let me just begin by saying this. Sandra, it's good to be with you, Bob, and the fact that you have Hector and Carlos and Sandra. I hope that whoever watches this program, especially the CUNY students, I'm a CUNY twofer.
Brooklyn College, by the way.
Take LaGuardia and Lehman College, Boogie Down Bronx. I hope they take their time to listen to these scholars. The fact is that what you've heard here, and even in your introduction, is there's so much information there that needs to be discerned, it needs to be disseminated, it needs to really be absorbed in order for us to understand where we are as Puerto Ricans today. And underlying all of that today is the issue of what the status of Puerto Rico should be. And so even though we're all family here, and even in my family, my blood-related family, people have different opinions whether Puerto Rico should be independent, should be a commonwealth, or should be a statehood. With that said, I'm a statehooder, and we can have that conversation. And what I hope that those, especially non-Puerto Rican, and even Puerto Rican students of Puerto Rican descent understand, is that whatever issue you hear about today in the United States, or any individual like Donald Trump, the issue of status is far more and has been far more divisive, and has been around far longer, and it disallows for the powers that be in Puerto Rico, the influencers, the leadership, to be able to make the right decisions to help the people on the island, especially during times of need. Whether you have an economic crisis, whether you have hurricanes, whether you have earthquakes, whether you have, whatever it is, every issue is impacted by this whole debate on the status of Puerto Rico. As the Bronx Borough President, when I was in the Bronx Borough President, the most proudest day of my life professionally was when Hurricane Maria hit, even though it was so tragic. 10 days later, we were able to shut down Aldous Avenue in Southern Boulevard in the Bronx. And little old Puerto Ricans from the Bronx, little old Bronx, everybody thinks that we're poor. We were able, with our friends throughout the city of New York, we were able to raise over 300,000 pounds of food, water, clothing, so on and so forth for the people of the island of Puerto Rico. This impacts us because our family members are over there. When Hurricane Maria hit Mommy, first of all, it hit on September 20th, that was Mommy's birthday. Mommy's here. She did not hear from her siblings who are over there for over a week and a half. And we're just one family. This has happened to thousands and hundreds of thousands of families, number one. Number two, when we hear of death, that affects us. When we have to send goods over, people who have their wallets already squeezed over here are pouring everything that they have and more. Some of them are going unfed over here so they can send food to their family members and even people that they don't know over there. And then when the folks from over there come over here, it strains our services, healthcare system, the educational system, housing. So when something bad happens in Puerto Rico, and whenever we have a federal government, and I said I'm a statehooder, but I agree with my colleagues here today that Puerto Rico, unfortunately, continues to be the oldest colony in the history of the planet. And anybody who says that they're woke should take this up as a challenge, whether you're Puerto Rican or not. And so when the federal government is totally turning their backs, whether you're Democrat, and I'm a proud Democrat, or Republican, or independent, it's been going on, turning their backs on over 3 million Americans over there, something needs to change. If not, we get negatively impacted over here. We feel that anxiety, we feel that pain, and it's unfortunate that when other countries are going through the same thing, the United States reacts with their wallets and with all of the resources they have, and we don't see the same for the island of Borinquen.
Let me ask, Hector and Carlos jump in, Sandra jump in. Crisis can be an opportunity, but there have been multiple crises where the opportunity hasn't been seized or has been half seized. Is there an opportunity here? I don't mean to diminish, I don't mean by saying that to diminish the crisis.
There is an opportunity for Puerto Ricans in the United States to organize, keeping Puerto Rico as a focus, press their elected officials in Congress to actually execute oversight over the political forces in Puerto Rico, and specifically the management board in Puerto Rico, that has oversight itself and approval rights of the budget of Puerto Rico, the austerity budgets that are being implemented. Congress, the natural resources committees of the Senate and the House, need to exercise their oversight roles and scrutinize the role of La Junta and see how it is that...
La Junta meaning the board.
Correct.
Right.
And see how it is that they're operating, not necessarily on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico, but on behalf of the bondholders that have Puerto Rican debt in their pockets.
Hector. Is this crisis creates opportunity?
Crisis creates opportunity if you seize it.
If you
and
seize
if there's
it.
some intention, and I think we're all here and we can all talk to you about the different sides of the Puerto Rico story as felt and experienced by Puerto Ricans. But what I can tell you is, what does the U.S. want? How has this just been neglect over 123 years? That they haven't been paying attention? Or is there something more going on here? Why are we still 123 years later having the same debate?
Let me ask you-
And especially when it's well known that Puerto Ricans are the ones that control all the cards in this game we're playing here.
But let me ask you, and I want Sandra to jump in, but just when I was a reporter in Miami, and I was in the 80s, was covering the Sandinistas and the problems in the province in Central America, and people used to say Americans will do anything for Latin Americans except read about. And but this is a Puerto Rican moment. People are paying attention, but.
And every attempt to bring clarity to the matter just fizzles away. Look at the last time in Congress, they were trying to discuss what kind of a project was going to be put in place, and it evaporated.
I don't want to focus totally on the status question that Ruben, but partly Puerto Ricans have been unable, as a collective, through the vote, to be able to have a clear position on what they want the future to be.
Absolutely. And it takes two to tango, as they say.
Well, they're the most important voice.
Right. So let's see if we can get that Puerto Rico voice together. And Puerto Ricans have been talking about it forever. Who are we negotiating? Who are we really negotiating with, and what is their position? Because the game, as it's being played right now, is you Puerto Ricans figure it out, reveal all your cards, and then we'll tell you yes or no, as opposed to as two peoples. And I am very much for Puerto Ricans in the U.S. having some voice in that debate. Oh, by the way, it isn't just the debate of whoever happens to be living in the island the day the debate's supposed to happen. It should be a broad debate, and there should be a table that has the Puerto Rican side of the table and the U.S. side of the table. And we put all the issues on the table, and we talk them through. But Puerto Ricans have been left to discuss it with each other and figure out what they want to do, while the other side just sits and observes a game that has no end.
That's by design.
That's the sign I'm trying to...
Not only observes, but profits.
Well, of course.
Right.
Runs the show.
But politically, 10 years ago, the voters in Puerto Rico made one consensual determination by majority. that they did not want to continue the territorial relationship with the United States. What options the non-territorial alternatives were, whether it is statehood or independence or some sort of sovereign association.
Some confederated
right?
independence.
That has yet to be debated, but the fact is that Congress has not acted on that. That they want Puerto Ricans decided in 2012 that they did not want to maintain a territorial relationship with the United States.
Sandra.
I totally agree with Carlos and Hector. It's and actually and Ruben, the core issue is the status of the colony, and we need to resolve it. And Hector is absolutely right. We don't know who we're negotiating from. Listen, we're talking about hundreds and thousands of freedom fighters who have died and been in jail, fighting for a change in status. And so we need to really have clarity on who it is that we are negotiating with, as Hector says. Right now, negotiating and talking it among ourselves has not been fruitful. And you asked the question earlier, Bob, that I want to go back to, which is crisis creates opportunity. Crisis has created opportunities for vulture funds, for Wall Streeters who go in and swoop in and buy properties at decimated values. Our crises, right, has made millionaires of bondholders and also American investors. And the United States Congress and the United States is directly responsible for the hell that we are living today.
Let me.
I just want to point something
Yes.
out that really is unnerving to me as a Puerto Rican woman. In the 1930s, the United States began a eugenics program. And by the 1980s, 1/3 of the women population in Puerto Rico was illegally sterilized without consent. In the 1990s, Puerto Rican women were experimented on. We were the first women, human beings on the planet to be tested on with narcotics in the 1990s. Big Pharma has benefited and profited off the bodies of our people.
That was OxyContin.
I'm sorry? OxyContin, that's
yes.
right. In 1999, an LA Times report, everybody can Google it, kids Google it, in 1999 found that 66 Puerto Rican women who were recuperating from reproductive surgery were tested on unknowingly with these narcotics. We don't know if some of them died. We don't know what happened to these women, but this is part of a long history of violence against our people. So the status is absolutely crucial to resolve. And we need to resolve it as Puerto Ricans, but we also need to know who are we negotiating with, as Hector says, this Congress. Who are we really negotiating with?
If I may, I hope again that all of the students who are watching this, please play it back and listen to the scholars and do your research and take a deep dive, because there's always so much energy and protest and advocacy on so many different issues. And this is, for instance, if you are a young person and you believe in climate change, there's no bigger case study that it exists and that we should do something about it than what's going on in Puerto Rico with the hurricanes and the floods and the mudslides. And if you are a student and if you're talking about imperialism and colonialism, and if you're against that, if you look at what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine right now, and you're mad at that, look what's happening in Puerto Rico, over the last 120 something years. Fight for that. If you believe in women's rights, look what Sandra just said. Look what's happening here. And this doesn't make me anti-American. And it doesn't make me, I'm a statehooder. But I'll tell you one thing, that either give me statehood or let Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans decide to do something other than what we have today in place, because it's just not working. Going back to Hector's piece, the reason why the negotiators, being Congress and the U.S., has not really engaged is by design. It's the reason why we don't get together, because, again, it becomes such a divisive issue, and we're just, debating within ourselves, that we don't organize the way that we should around candidacies, around, making sure that Puerto Rico is taken care of. And then also, Bob, when you have Puerto Ricans who are over, even though we're twice the population of our brethren and our sisters in Puerto Rico, then we wind up voting with what's happening locally. The elected officials wind up prioritizing issues based on what's going to continue to get them reelected in their communities here before they prioritize whatever it is that they want the federal or the federal government should be doing for the people in the island of Puerto Rico. And so, you take all of this and you wonder, at some point, we need to make sure that, A, we get organized collectively, put our differences aside, but also, B, educate and incorporate non-Puerto Ricans the way other major issues have, to be able to help us have the best for the people in our island. And then last, I just want to say this piece. If I'm a recovering politician, which means I'm a
recovering journalist.
Which means I'm doing a little bit better financially. If you are of Puerto Rican descent, the one thing that you need to do to avoid the gentrification that's happening on the island is put your money together with your family and invest and buy in Puerto Rico, which is something that I'm about to do with my family.
I will say that the status question is the existential question for Puerto Rican politics and society in general. Yet, whatever the status of Puerto Rico is still going to be facing natural disasters, and increasingly so given that we are on the direct path of hurricanes constantly. We are also going to have governmental structures that are ineffective. And we have the neglect of a federal government which is going to be overseeing Puerto Rico either as a state or as a territory, not if Puerto Rico were to become independent. So that reality is there. And whatever status we look at for Puerto Rico at the moment, that's not going to change immediately. And right now, Puerto Rico also needs attention today and tomorrow and the day after. And that is also something that we need to look at. And what we see is that right now, there is a disengagement coming from Congress. And Congress is the one that has the authority to look into what is happening to the levers that they have put in place for Puerto Rico.
Can I do
Yes,
this?
please.
I'm sorry, but if that's the case, right, then for someone like me, shouldn't then Puerto Rico become a state so that we can have 6, 7 Congress members, which we have, this is the point of contention here. If you become a state, you'll have 6 or 7 Congress members, 2 U.S. senators. We've never had a U.S. senator of Puerto Rican descent in the history of this country. We have a representative, a resident representative with a voice and no vote. Voz y no, voto y no, sin voz, right? In the House of Representatives, so you can't vote there. So if we want Congress to really engage with Puerto Rico, wouldn't it make sense that we have these, individuals who have a vote now to be able to effectuate that conversation there,
Maybe.
especially where Puerto Rico would have more electoral votes than probably half of the states.
Let me
union.
But that's a good point.
Let me build on that also, since we could do this for hours. But in terms of the crisis at hand, what difference would it make if Puerto Rico was a state or if Puerto Rico was independent? If you assume that the response to the current status is grotesquely inadequate, what difference? I mean, there are certain
That's the challenge, right? For a lot of people, you have to solve the status issue first, and then you create a pathway to begin to be able to solve other problems. For some other folks, you have to solve the problems first, and then Puerto Rico will be ready to either be independent or be a state.
Yes.
Right? And how do
What
you
difference
break through
would
that?
it
Let me give you
make?
an
Right,
example
right.
of how I think we should
Yes.
break through that. The electrical grid was destroyed by Maria.
yes.
Some funds have been made available by the U.S. Were Puerto Rico to be independent, probably by the IMF. So it's not an issue of who can make the funds available. Funds are there. And rather than building a resilient island, we tell the people to be resilient and deal with apagones all the time. Why don't we? Puerto Rico has sun, Puerto Rico has water. There's been great advances in storage of energy. There've been great advances in the creation and generation of all different points of energy. And we then, what we do is, let's say, how do we set up a company to make some people filthy rich, providing electricity, as opposed to saying, how do we use these resources to build the more resilient structure that we can build on the island for people to
It's a little
use,
bit-
because there are economic interest involved, there are oil interest involved, there are electrical companies involved that benefit from having things the way they were and getting their cut. So how do we break from that? And whose responsibility is it to break from that?
this
Is it the U.S.? Is it the folks in Puerto Rico? How do we together say, okay, let's take this money and use it in the best possible way?
And on
How
that
would you
point,
say that?
on
That's
that
right.
point,
That's right. That's right. Hector is absolutely right. And none of this rebuilding, right, has the community been involved. Puerto Ricans are protesting every single day. And there are organizations like Casa Pueblo and Queremos Sol and countless others who have been demanding
Well, Sandra, let me stop
the
you for-
end, the
let me-
end of fossil fuels. So
let me
we're
stop you
talking
for one-
about
Let me stop you for 1 second because,
yeah.
in fact, Puerto Ricans are trying to respond.
Yes.
In terms of building a solar grid on their own in
Yep.
times of repair, and have been sued, and have been, and this outside, this I believe it's Texas-based, Lua, the privatized, for its own profit reasons, has worked to stop local people from rebuilding their own grid, for localizing their grid, for using the kinds of.
And even if
Am
they
I-
do, they're
am
going to
I
be charged.
correct
They're
on
going to
that?
be charged a tax because that money needs to be used to pay the debt.
And
Right?
it-
So even if you invest yourself in some kind of trying to get off the grid's going to grab your pocket anyway. That's what I'm saying. We need to break from that kind of model.
and La Junta is approving whether to impose a 23% surcharge, a $23 surcharge, or $27 surcharge on everybody's electrical bill, just to pay that debt.
Yeah. So
But to-
You guys,
but-
you guys, this is a robbery right now. What we are experiencing in Puerto Rico is imperial power at its grossest, right? We're talking about U.S. corporations that are going in there and fleecing the people. For the next, I have to pay. Now, I bought in 2016 a property, and I have seen my electrical bill rise 7 times, right? Since 2016. No other place in America has this happened. And we're
But to
talking
answer,
about-
go ahead. I'm
sorry?
sorry. Go ahead, finish,
Yeah?
Sandra. I'm sorry. Finish. Go ahead.
No, well, what we're talking about here, what we're seeing is a fleecing of the citizens of Puerto Rico and our resources, and ignoring what we have clamoring for, right?
So let me just say this
Right.
to Bob's question. What's the difference between statehood?
What difference would it make
So
now?
Sandra
Right.
just said no other place in the United States has this happen. Why? Because they're states. And so if you get Puerto Rico now with 6 or 7 Congress members, as many Puerto Ricans as we have in Florida, and as many Puerto Ricans as we have in New York, and as many Puerto Ricans as we have in Jersey,
In Chicago,
collectively, we don't have 6 congressional members among those 3 states that are Puerto Rican descent. And we certainly don't have 2 U.S. senators. So whether La Junta, whether we agree that if La Junta should have happened to be, when it was first put in place, whether or not it's working now, if we had, again, 6, 7 congressional members, 2 U.S. senators, maybe La Junta wouldn't be getting away
I
with what they do
completely agree
now.
with you that political power
I'm
is
sorry,
crucial.
Ben, I love you, but I
Okay,
cannot
but-
agree with
but-
you.
Mike,
I
go ahead,
cannot
go
agree
ahead.
with you.
The
I
issue
am
is
part-
that
Go ahead,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm part of the Puerto Rican Futures, and I imagine all the brilliant Puerto Ricans wanting to build a new nation, wanting and desiring and already building it. And many, I am on the island often, and there are people rebuilding from the ground up on their own, right? On their own. So there's one way to look at it. Why would I want to be, as a Puerto Rican woman, part of an imperial nation that has raped my people for hundreds of years? I see us as entering into a negotiation with reparations so that we can be, right now, we're being held hostage by the Jones Act. So that's the first thing I would want to see Congress act on immediately so that we can start building toward an independent future. We don't need 6 senators, 7, 12 members of Congress in the US. What we need is sovereignty, because we have the brilliance and the capacity to be part of this global world as a sovereign nation.
As a political scientist, I cannot dismiss the point that Hector just made also, that you must count on political power, right? So yes, Puerto Rico, if it were to become a state, it would have perhaps 5, likely 4, given the population decline, members of the U.S. House of Representatives, but 2 senators. Unfortunately, we have also seen that, Puerto Rico is still a poor territory, right? And as a poor territory, and if you compare Puerto Rico to, say, Mississippi and New Mexico are the 2 poorest states in the Union. Their political power, even with the same population basis, certainly Mississippi, does not have the same political power that New Jersey or Connecticut or some other places have. We also need to contend to the electoral nature.
But they have more political power than Puerto Rico.
Well, yes. Or we also should consider that, for instance, you made the point before. The Bronx is the seat of Puerto Rican power in the United States, right? Puerto Rican political power. It has 3 representatives in New York City, right? 1 in Florida. They are advocating for Puerto Rico to a greater or lesser extent, and still things are not moving forward. They're moving further because we do have that political representation in the states, but they're also facing a lot of vested interest, involving Puerto Rico, that are fleecing not just Puerto Ricans, but also U.S. citizens, U.S. taxpayers outside of Puerto Rico, since a lot of the funding comes from Washington, right?
So for me, just on that point, I want to get to what Sandra said earlier. Yes, we have Puerto Rican elected officials here who are advocating for Puerto Rico, but because they have differences in the status debate, they're on different sides of the status debate, they approach their assistance and advocacy differently. It breaks my heart that when Maria hit Puerto Rico, Fiona, or the earthquakes, whenever you see delegations from New York go over there, how they meet with different political parties over there instead of having one unified effort. That happens all the time. That needs to stop. With that said, as divisive as it can be, the one thing that I definitely agree with Sandra wholeheartedly is there are people on the ground. The bright side to all of this is that the CBOs, the non-for-profits, have now become the vehicle, the avenue to be able to have at least donors who distrust the government officials over there to be able to send money and have them, and because they're so well informed locally, they've been doing an incredible job at rebuilding Puerto Rico and its infrastructure where they can. Number 2, if nothing else, where it unifies us is that whether you feel like Sandra or you feel like me, we all are in agreement that it cannot stay the way that it is today.
That's very true. And I'm here with folks that know politics really well. So I'm going to take the kind of professor exit just to tell you this, Bob. I can imagine a really wonderful statehood with really great people, because in the end it depends on who you elect. And it depends on how good they are. And it depends on what values they bring to the table.
I'm not sure.
I can imagine a really successful statehood like the one my brother Ruben is presenting. And I can imagine a horrible statehood. Just like I can imagine a really beautiful independence and a horrible independence, okay? The issue...
Our politics here, it goes right to that point.
So the issue continues to be, how are we going to empower people to have the information and the resources to move the issue forward, as opposed to staying in this hurricane vortex that we continue to be at?
I think we should listen to Bad Bunny, and I'll tell you why. It's not flip to say this, but Bad Bunny has built an empire with an indie label. He didn't join a major label to release his music, and right now he's the #1 artist in the world.
That was so good. That's so good, Sandra. Wow.
And he's doing it, and I have to tell you that this is, we're all feeling this.
Absolutely put Puerto Rico off the charts. But it's not an economic development model as much as we love it.
But let me expand on this. He didn't sign with Capitol Records or the major music companies. He owns his music. And he's done it on his own terms.
Right.
He hasn't had to cross over and sing in English or rap in English. He's doing it in Puerto Rican Spanish, which is the most beautiful Spanish I've ever heard in the world, right? He's doing it and he's showing us that there's a new way of doing it. This is why I'm part of the Puerto Rican Futures, because I believe we can be a spectacular independent nation. We are an archipelago. And one more thing, I don't like to hear that Puerto Rico is a poor country. It is a rich country and it's made so many people rich, right? Not just recently, but over the course of since 1493. So
It's a rich port for sure.
I'm sorry?
It's a rich port for sure.
For sure.
It's generated a lot of
intentional.
wealth, and it has a lot of assets.
Let me
But there are
interrupt
obstacles are also real, and
I'm
the
sorry?
but the obstacles are also very real.
Oh,
And the
absolutely.
challenges are also very real, right?
Absolutely.
So-
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Let me,
So we can look at Bad Bunny as a way to reimagine how we can be free in the world, how we can create and build wealth and contribute magnificence to the world.
Let me take our first question from one of the students. Tell us your name and your campus, please.
My name is Elena Sasu, and I'm a John Jay student. I'm a final year student at John Jay. So I have two questions. The first question is, what resources are available for the people that have been displaced, and how can the student body of CUNY help? If you wanted to help in any way, how can we help?
Well, the idea of what's available. Ruben, you've talked about what people in the past have done to try to raise, products, stuff to send down there. But what can people here do?
Well, we tried the best that we can after Hurricane Maria to identify those that came from Puerto Rico, work with the city of New York, place them in housing, make sure that their kids are in the educational system, make sure that they get the medical assistance and supervision that they needed. So many of this folks who did not have access to insulin or other medications or machinery that needed electricity to work were afforded that while they were here. I haven't been the borough president this last year, but I know, for instance, the medical facility and institutions like Montefiore that I work for now is doing all it can to send out medical supplies, have delegations of doctors and surgeons, receive people over here. So that needs to happen. In Central Florida, who I have some family members there, I think that initially there was a better outreach by the Republican governor over there than there was by the government over here to be able to help the Puerto Ricans. I think a lot of that, though, has dissipated, and the federal government needs to step up. Joe Biden needs to step up. Joe Biden criticized Donald Trump with a bunch of all of us, right? And so what have we really seen from this administration that's really benefited Puerto Rico after multiple earthquakes? Whoever thought Puerto Rico would have earthquakes, and certainly now after Fiona. It was almost like after Fiona, what happens, and like around Maria, whenever there's a hurricane in the continental United States, it's sort of like everybody forgets about what happened to Puerto Rico. And so the people who are stepping it up are the non-for-profits, the community-based organizations.
Right.
Don't send your money to any government officials in Puerto Rico, regardless of what the party affiliation is. Send it to the credible CBOs and people who are boots on the ground and are really doing the work to benefit those that need it the most.
And if you let me, two narratives that we need to fight against. Sandra was doing the first, I think Ruben was doing the second. The first is the narrative that Puerto Rico is a poor place. Puerto Rico doesn't have a lot of wealth, but it has a lot of wealthy people. And not just rich people in terms of financial. Smart, intelligent, creative, and Sandra just gave us an example of a young kid that was a bagger in a supermarket, singing his tunes and putting them up on the internet, and all of a sudden, it's like the biggest artist in the planet, right? So there's capacity. And there's great smart and great strength. And we need to fight against that narrative, which is the same narrative that led to the contraception fiasco, right? Too many poor people around, we need to control them and, we will not let them reproduce because they're a problem. We continuously need to fight against that narrative. And the second that Ruben talked about when talking about self-assistance and the CBOs on the ground is that Puerto Ricans are looking for some kind of handout,
Right.
which has been a narrative in New York. Poor looking for a handout. And it's not an accident. It's part of that same colonial narrative that disempowers you, because that's what colonialism is. It's an economic system, but it's also a psychological tool of manipulation. It's a tool that tells you you're less than. You need in order to be able to. Let us play by the same rules, don't shackle us, invest and create opportunity, and we'll take care of the rest. That's it.
Insofar as what CUNY students can do, CUNY also created a CUNY Corps
Yep.
to fly students down to Puerto Rico and assist in the reconstruction after Maria. We need to see whether that is still in place now under Fiona and all the other efforts that are being undertaken. But there are also contacts between CUNY schools and the University of Puerto Rico and other universities down in Puerto Rico. So those may be point of contacts for students within CUNY.
Let me just expound on that because I saw with my own eyes after Hurricane Maria and the earthquakes. CUNY sent 500-600. It gives me goosebumps. The amount of students that went over there at 2, 3, 4 week clips at a time, and then another set of 500-600 went, and they would partner up with the students from La Universidad de Puerto Rico. Maritime University sent big barges from here, from the Bronx to Puerto Rico, where the students, not the kids, the students were used as
They're
dorm.
kids to us.
But they're adults. They,
Right, yes.
where they dormed. We were able to have a giant reception at one of the universities over there. The former governor, everybody, all the elected officials was able to have that interchange and exchange with the students. And if you look at how fulfilling it was for the students, and they weren't the CUNY Puerto Rican students. They were CUNY students from all walks of life, from representing descendants from every corner of the planet. It's the most beautiful thing that you ever saw in your life, and that's something that CUNY students can, and hopefully that program is still
I
ongoing.
taught one of those classes, and I had students from Puerto Rico who were very proud to take their peers around. I had students that were Dominicans that were basically saying, "De lo mismo." Just, a little difference here and there, pero somos lo mismo. I had other Latino students who were embracing the experience, and then non-Latino students of all kinds that really loved it. And they were placed in a town called Barranquitas, supporting building roofs in houses. Yep. And I asked them to write a journal. And one of the students writes in the journal, when I was sitting at the organization today, I got a phone call from a lady that said that she had it and she wanted to kill herself. I just listened to the lady. I gave her comfort and support. I told her we're going to visit her. And I made it my project while I was there to visit that lady almost every day that I could. You never forget that. Those are learning. That student wasn't trained for that.
Right, and you can't beat
We couldn't
that in
possibly
terms of
train them. They were
assistance.
just trying to help, but they were in real situations with real people that were going through real pain. And they all figured out how to provide comfort and support because it's a very human thing. And that was a beautiful thing to see.
I want to jump in quickly.
Yes.
And the student asked, what can CUNY students do? I think CUNY students should listen to students in Puerto Rico. Stay on top of the news. Right now, most of the people on the streets of Puerto Rico protesting Luma, which is the U.S.-Canadian company that's fleecing the archipelago.
The electrical company.
The electrical company. Students are the ones leading the charge. And so stay in touch, keep Puerto Rico in the news, keep Puerto Rico in your social media pages very active. There's no better way to see change when young people get together and imagine a new future. So that's what I encourage CUNY students to do, to go in there, to follow students, to get involved, and to ask and to listen. Unfortunately, on this panel, there isn't anyone who lives on the Big Island or the small islands. And I know, Bob, you had mentioned that you had a guest. So I think part of the conversation is also not to, as an exiled Puerto Rican right now, having all the comforts of going into not having, every other day, like my cousins in Ponce and Peñuelas, losing electricity and not having clean water. My experience is different as an exiled Boricua. It's important for us to listen to the people who are on the ground and experiencing colonialism in its every day, because it is not easy. By the way, talking about suicide, Hector, Puerto Rico has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. I think post-Hurricane Maria, it was 1 out of 3 Puerto Ricans had suicide ideation. Yeah. We're talking about the real human effects of violence that is man-made, right? Climate change is man-made, right? Colonialism is man-made. White man-made, by the way.
Right. Let me take one more question. We have about 7 minutes to go. So tell us your name and your campus, please.
Hi, my name is Zal Sayam, and I go to John Jay College. So my question is that one issue we see with Puerto Rico is that many of the larger companies are taking advantage of the situation being seen from with the example being talked about with the electrical grid and whatnot. So even if there was a solution of statehood or sovereignty, is there a viable solution to actually deal with the issues with big corporations taking advantage of the island? Because personally speaking, I feel like it might make it easier for Puerto Ricans to maybe find a solution as to if they would like statehood or sovereignty, if they first found a solution as to how to fix their own economy at first.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, right?
And maybe you can solve that here too.
Yeah, we can start right. We have that issue, a lot of those issues here. But at the same time, we also, when you look at the electric company in Long Island, not treating folks in Long Island, the state legislature and the governor reacted to that, right? So wherever there's political power, and there's no question, there's irrefutable that the people in Long Island, hold a lot of, political sway here in the state of New York. Something happened over there. With that said, maybe that's my opinion, that there should be statehood, and we can continue to debate that. But if there's a better solution on the independent side, what I'm saying is, for over 100 years, for 50 since what is it? 1952.
1953.
We've had what we have today, and it is just not working. And so, what's the definition of insanity?
One thing we need to look at is the local government of Puerto Rico. A lot of the solutions are found in Puerto Rico. And right now, we do have a government in Puerto Rico that is not working effectively. And a lot of the regulations that take place and make solutions function or not function are in the hands of Puerto Rican legislators and executives. And whether they make it work or not, that's also a question of political will.
Let me.
Yes. And John, you mentioned corporations, because corporations are more powerful than governments. This is what we found in the reality of 2022. So is your question regarding the economic structure? Are we going to be a capitalist society? Are we going to be social democrats? What will this government look like, in a post colonial government, right?
It'd be good to have a say. Right? It'd be good to have a say in what mix of this and that and the other thing you want. The thing is that right now we don't get to decide what the mix of ingredients is.
If we have, I know we have another student question, but I'll tell you this: Puerto Rico is an island. When you look at the amount of people who come out and vote, the voter turnout.
An archipelago, remember, not an island. We're made up of 143
an archipelago. Okay, yes, okay, ma'am. Okay, Sam. but if you look, it's over 80% of a voter turnout. Far higher than any other state. If Puerto Rico was a state, I get it's changing because of population. I get it, but the fact is, what's the voter turnout? What's the voter turnout going to be in the state of New York? On November 8th.
Let me stop you there.
And so the voters will hold, if there was a state, the voters will hold their elected officials way more accountable than you see in other states,
Okay,
including
let
the state
me
of New
just
York.
try to get, we only
Okay,
have
go ahead.
3.5 minutes left. Let me get one last question from a student then, please. Your name and your campus.
My name is Amy Gall. My campus is New York City College of Technology. My question is, Puerto Rico is always talked about as a single place, despite the many towns and regions which make up the island. Can the electrical grid issues and some of the other problems be dealt with more locally?
Well, and we only have 3 minutes left, but the idea
That's a
of,
great
but
question.
it's
Oh, my
actually a great,
that's a
it's
great
actually a great
My
question because the
goodness.
local attempts to restore power are precisely go to the point of breaking the need for a massive grid as you go towards solar, et cetera,
But
et cetera.
let me
So
just
we only got 2.5
let me just
minutes
answer.
left.
Let me
Yes.
try to answer that with a question to Sandra. Sandra, how many
Yes.
municipalities you said Puerto Rico had again?
78.
And how many
If
mayors?
you don't count the Bronx.
And how many mayors?
78.
78.
78.
And does Puerto Rico have the population of New York City?
No, it does not.
It does not.
It-
So here
it
you
does
have a place with less than half of the population of New York City, and it has 78 different mayors.
Right. But more than that, in the 30s, in the 40s, the electrical system and the power supply system was decentralized. It became centralized, just like, for instance, the MTA had to be created, just like New York City's transit had to be integrated. The problem that we're having right now is that there is no fair distribution of power. There is no competition in the provision of power, and there is no provisions for letting individuals create their own power in
That's
Puerto
right.
Rico. So
That's right.
because there is a monopoly distribution of
And the
power,
monopoly
and there
is
a
fighting
monopoly
back,
of
and
the
the mon-
generation of power. Correct.
and the monopoly is
There is a
fighting
plan.
back.
There is a federal plan in place to make Puerto Rico resilient and sustainable by the year 2050. It is not moving forward because of the vested interests of these corporations and the government of Puerto Rico.
And Carlos, in the last election, that's right. Everything I agree with everything you said. In the last election, Puerto Ricans voted for solar power, but what happened was the government that is in power today slid in a 50-year transition, and this 50-year transition will import gas, natural gas from Pennsylvania that's fracked. And in fact, the Jones Act was reimagined a little bit, was reamended so that a certain billionaire could import this gas to the island. And right now, what's happening in the Big Island is the creation of all these gas ports in towns. That if there is an accident, man, I am so scared for what will happen in Salinas and along the southern coast where I'm from. So the solutions are on the ground and locally. It's just that the government, both federal and state, is not counting
Well,
on
okay.
these nonprofits.
Let me stop you right there. We're about running out of time. I always try to make deadline, and I want to thank everybody. This is a really spirited
you.
discussion. Thank the students. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time on CUNY Forum. Thank you.